In this section of the Kestros Alpha tutorial, I'll be showing how to create your own custom component types, as well as resolve some of the validation issues that may arise when adding your component type. So the first thing I'll do is I'll go ahead and jump over to IntelliJ and drill into our front-end module until we get to Apps, Kestros Tutorial Site, Components, Content, and at this level we'll add our new component type. So we'll call this tutorial component, and we'll create our .content.xml configuration file. So at this level, we could either copy the configuration from an existing component type, or we can jump over to the Kestros documentation under creating new component types and just copy the configuration sample from there. So go ahead and just update the JCR title, the description, the component group is fine as content components, and then the Sling resource type is fine because it's extending the Kestros parent component, which is giving our component type access to not only the dynamic script resolution logic, but also inline variations and a few other features as well. So now that we have our component type configuration set up, we can start adding views, and the first that we'll add is our common view. For now, we won't have any properties that this view calls, so we'll just add a paragraph and say this is the common view. And if we go ahead and build this out, and we'll do install bundle, install package, and we'll go ahead and install our site at this level as well. So we'll say install content. And if we jump back over to Kestros, as soon as the build is done, we should see our new site and new component type get added. So we can refresh here. Our Kestros tutorial site now shows up. We do see that there's some validation issues with our content. And then if we go to components, we can see our tutorial component has been added, and there are also some validation issues here. So let's resolve those first. So we'll jump into it. First, we can see that the Sling model is not properly configured because there's no Sling model associated to the component type's resource type. The model has not been properly documented. First of all, because the model class, which there is none because it hasn't been linked with the resource type yet, but there's no Kestros model annotation on any linked classes. And then there's also no validation service linked to this component type either. So we'll go ahead and do those. So the first thing we'll need to do is jump back over to core, source, main, and then we'll drill down to components. And we'll create a new package for our component type. So we'll call this tutorial component. And then we'll create our Java class. First thing we'll do is give it the Sling model annotation. Adaptables will be resource.class. And now we'll tie it to the resource type, which is going to be the path to the component without the /apps. This will extend our base component. And then let's just give it a property that we can assign as well. So we'll go public string get text. And this will return get property. So this will return the value of our text property under the JCR resource, or an empty string if there is no property there. So we'll just go back over to the documentation to double check that if we think this will resolve all the validation issues. So it should resolve this one because it is now linking a Sling model to our resource type. But the model is still not properly documented because the Kestros model annotation has not been added. So we'll go ahead and add that. And the Kestros model annotation is where we would link up any validation services that we'd want to add to our component type, or we could also update the linked context model. But for now, we will do neither of those. So just having the Kestros model annotation is sufficient. And then we can see that there is another validation check under model is properly documented. That's going to check that all public methods are annotated with the Kestros property annotation. So since we've actually added a new public method, even if we were to build right now, this would become valid, but this check would then become invalid. So let's go ahead and add that now. So we'll say Kestros property. We'll give this a description, and we'll just say element text. We can say configurable is true. The JCR property name is going to be text. And now we should be good to build. And the purpose behind the Kestros model annotation is simply to aid in the automated documentation. So as soon as this is done building, we can just go ahead and refresh our validation. And we can see that the component type is now considered valid because the model is now properly documented and configured. The model has also been configured with a model validation service because the Kestros model annotation comes with a default service, which contains no validators. If we scroll down, we should see that the API has also been updated with our new text property. So now the next step will be to add a new view for our existing UI framework. So we'll jump back over to front end, and we'll drill to our component type. I'll double check what the UI framework code is, and I'll create a directory at this level. Adding the content.html. And since this is a new view, I'm just going to jump back over and grab all the parameters that, or the objects that are being defined that go with this component type. This is defining my tutorial component object, which is where I'll be able to call that text property from, the context, and the templates path, which is where I'll be able to call any of the templates associated to the UI framework. So for now, I'll do a paragraph with the tutorial.text. Now, of course, I won't be able to configure this without my edit dialog. So I'll just create a new folder, edit.content.xml. And then I'm actually going to just take the edit configuration from the sample component that already exists. And we can see the JCR primary type here is int unstructured. The resource type is Kestros CMS dialog. And then we have a content area, and then the text property, the field for that text property. So we'll call this text. It's using the text field, which is fine. The property name should match the property name from the getText method. So we'll call that text. And then we'll leave this as autofocus since this is the first field within the dialog. And finally, we'll just go ahead and build this out, and we will need the install package command as well. Now, as soon as that's done building, we can go to our site, and we'll go to our Kestros tutorial site this time. And let's add in our tutorial component. And now we can start configuring the text. Save that. And it looks like there is an issue pulling that up, so we'll just double check what that might be. And it looks like I simply just called the wrong object. So we'll just go ahead and build that out real quick. Now that's not currently an issue that we have a validator around, but we are progressively adding more and more validators to the framework as we go along. And now that that's done building, we can go ahead and preview. And we have our new component type with the configured text.